It really happened quite organically in the studio. You know, my famous occasion with bass radically altering the whole attitude of the song was when John came in. Here come on flat top, he got grooving up slowly, he got juju, he want hold it rolling, he got. I'm saying, wait a minute. That's Chuck Berry's song. This is Chuck Berry's song, which is called You Can't Catch Me, which not only is like that. Here come on, the opening line is, here come all flat top. I said, you know, look, it's a great song, I love it. I said, but we got to do something to get away from that. So I just suggested we slowed it down. So instead of we go. Okay. Wow.
The initial inspiration for John's iconic song, Come Together, came from an unexpected source in early June 1969. It started with Timothy Leary, the outspoken LSD advocate, who had decided to run for governor of California in the 1970 election, going up against Ronald Reagan. Around that time, Leary and his wife Rosemary were invited to Montreal for John's second bed-in for peace. Wow. They arrived on the 6th day, June 1st, and joined John and Yoko in room 1742 of the Queen Elizabeth Hotel. There, the Learys were asked to sing the chorus of Give Peace a Chance, the first single from the Plastic Ono Band. The next day, June 2nd, John thanked Leary for taking part and asked if there was anything he could do to support his campaign.
And Come Together was an expression that Leary and Rosemary had come up with for his attempt at being president or whatever he wanted to be. And they'd asked me to write them a single, you know, a song, a campaign song, and I tried and I couldn't come up with it, but I came up with this Come Together, which would have been no good to, they couldn't have a campaign song like that, right? So I wrote another little thing called Come Together and Join the Party, Come Together and Join the Party, and it never got further than that, and they never came back to ask for the song. But I know Leary attacked me years later saying I ripped him off. I didn't rip him off, I had it there waiting for him. It's just that it turned into Come Together. What am I going to do, give it to him?
Really?
After playing around with a few versions, he recorded a demo on the same equipment they'd used the day before, gave it to Leary, and Leary had played it on alternative radio stations across California to support his campaign. But things didn't go so well for Leary. In December of '69, he was charged with marijuana possession, and his campaign fell apart. According to Revolution in the Head by Ian MacDonald, Reagan took advantage of the situation. Implacably opposed to LSD, Reagan saw to it that his challenger was denied bail on a marijuana charge and kept in the Orange County Jail for the duration of the election. Meanwhile, John saw the potential in the song and brought it to the studio just 7 weeks later for Abbey Road. Leary was surprised to hear the song on the radio while in jail. Although the new version was certainly a musical and lyrical improvement on my campaign song, he said, I was a bit miffed that Lennon had passed me over this way. When I had sent a mild protest to John, he replied with the typical Lennon charm and wit that he was a tailor and I was a customer who had ordered a suit and never returned. So he sold it to someone else. When John brought the song into the studio, it still needed work lyrically.
Come Together is me writing obscurely around an old Chuck Berry thing, and I left the line in, although it is nothing like the Chuck Berry song. They took me to court because I'd admitted this once years ago. I left the line, which is not just berries, there's a few flat top in it. Here come all flat top. I could have changed it to Here Come All Iron Face. The song remains independent of Chuck Berry or anybody else on earth. The thing was created in the studio. Yeah. And the lines are irrelevant.
It's me writing obscurely around an old Chuck Berry thing, John said, referring to Berry's 1956 song, You Can't Catch Me. In 1970, he added, I was doing that, You Can't Catch Me, and when I got to, I stopped, and then I said, It just came out Come Together, because Come Together was rolling around in my head. The opening line of Come Together, here come old Flaptop, he come groovin' up slowly, closely matches Chuck Berry's lyric. Here come a Flaptop, he was moving up with me.
Ooh.
John saw it as a tribute to Chuck Berry.
Okay.
I think it's a compliment to Chuck Berry, not a we resurrected him. Paul remembered it too. That was a lyric John could not let go of. And he couldn't better it, so he just used it. And I said, well, it's a bit of a nick, isn't it? He said, no, it's a quote. I said, okay, fair enough. John also hinted at another rock and roll influence buried in Come Together. At the end of each chorus, he pauses on the words, over me, which he said was a playful nod to Elvis's style. Over me was meant to be like a joke, like Elvis doing Over You, John said in 1970. Another detail in the song is John whispering, shoot me, which repeats throughout the track. This came from a song idea he had earlier that year during the Get Back sessions. It was from a jam called Watching Rainbows, played at Twickenham Studios on January 14th, with just John, Paul, and Ringo. George had temporarily quit. John can be heard saying shoot me over and over, just like in Come Together. On July 21st, John brought Come Together to EMI Studio 3, marking it his first new contribution for Abbey Road. The session began at 2:30 p.m. and was significant as it was the first new song John had introduced to the Beatles since April's The Ballad of John and Yoko. As Mark Lewison notes in the Beatles recording sessions, John had been keeping a low profile during recent sessions and had even declined to take part in some of them. But on this day, John was eager to participate. Jeff Emmerich recalls, John was in a pretty good mood that day. He seemed to come to life when we were working on one of his songs, rather than on one of Paul's or George's. True, all three of them exhibited a lack of patience if it wasn't their song. There was always a definite drop-off in interest whenever any one of them was working on another Beatles composition, but John was consistently the most flagrant offender. Come Together was a catchy, hooky tune, and even though it clearly owed a lot to Chuck Berry, its abstract, somewhat risque lyrics had that distinctive Lennon stamp. He adds that the original version John played was faster than what was eventually recorded. Come Together changed at a session, John explained. We said, let's slow it down. Let's do this to it. Let's do that to it. And it ends up however it comes out. I just said, look, I've got no arrangement for you, but you know how I want it. He added, give me something funky, and set up a beat, maybe, and they just all join in. And many years from now, Paul noted, I laid that bass line down, which very much makes the mood. That was my contribution to that. Emmerich confirms this, saying, it was Paul who suggested it be done at a slower tempo, with a swampy kind of sound, and John went along with it uncomplainingly. He always took well to constructive criticism. Emmerich continues, despite John's improved frame of mind, there were clearly still underlying tensions. The band kept breaking into long, pointless jam sessions, and I could see that John was treating Paul in an offhand manner. On July 22nd, following work on Oh Darling, they continued work on Come Together. Paul came up with the electric piano lick, Emmerich says, that pretty well defines Come Together. John even made a point of playing the piano line once he'd looked over Paul's shoulder and learned the part. That would never have happened in the old days. Both men knew that Paul was the better piano player, and he normally would be manning the keyboards even if they were recording a Lennon song. Finally, in some frustration, Paul blurted out, what do you want me to do on this track, John? John's reply was a diffident, don't worry, I'll do the overdubs on this. Paul looked a bit hurt, then angry. For a moment, I thought there was going to be an explosion. Instead, he contained himself, shrugged his shoulders, and simply walked out of the studio, one of the few times he ever left a session early. Paul had to have felt humiliated. But rather than having a fight or an argument about it, he chose just to get up and leave without any dramatics. The next day, he returned, and nothing further was ever said about it. On July 25th, following overdubs for Sun King, Mean Mr. Mustard, vocal harmonies were added to Come Together. Emmerich states that John not only sang the lead vocal, but also did all of the backing vocals on Come Together by himself. Paul later commented, "Even on Abbey Road, we don't do harmonies like we used to. I think it's sad." But isolated tracks suggest Paul did sing the backing vocals. And many years from now, Barry Miles mentions, Paul recorded a lot of heavy breathing on the end, but it was buried so deep in the mix as to be inaudible. In the end, everyone was pleased with the track. "Great record," Paul said in Anthology. George remarked, "Nice drumming from Ringo. I suppose you'd call it a rocker." John added,
It's one of my favorite Beatles tracks. Well, one of my favorite Lennon tracks, let's say that. It's really what the kind of music I like.
Yeah, the beginning.
You know, it's funky, it's bluesy, and I'm singing it pretty well. And I like the sound of the record. You can dance to it. I'll buy it.
Even though the song is still mostly seen as John's work, Paul had a big role in arranging the song in the studio, and ideas often got tossed around during recording. "I wrote 2 lines to Come Together," George said in a 1987 interview. In the end, that one Chuck Berry line, "Here Come Old Flat Top," ended up giving John a lot of headaches later on. Chuck Berry's publisher, Morris Levi, didn't see it as a tribute and filed a lawsuit. Unlike Timothy Leary, Levi wasn't going to let it slide. Often considered the most recognizable track on Abbey Road, and one of the most iconic tracks from the band's later years, Come Together immediately sets the tone for the band's brief but distinct new direction from the first moments of the recording. The phrase, "come together," intentional or not, was viewed by a good many as a call to action of sorts as we were entering the new decade. The Beatles spoke, and everybody listened.
All right, guys. So first off, no shout outs to Dan Ability for throwing this video my way. This suggestion via donation. So how Paul McCartney saved a Come Together. Shout outs to this channel, Beatles Bible, guys. I mean, we all know Come Together is one of John Lennon's most iconic tracks. You know, this song is moody, swampy, mysterious. You know, it's John, artist most hypnotic, if you ask me. But what this video breaks down beautifully is how Paul McCartney's musicianship, completely elevated it. Without Paul, I feel like this track couldn't have been just another bluesy jam. Instead, it became a masterpiece. Let's talk about that bass line, guys. I mean, Paul didn't just play. I mean, this man painted it with with bass. That sliding liquid groove, gave this song its entire swagger. If you ask me personally, I mean, it's the glue between John Lennon's vocals and Ringo Starr's, steady, subtle drumming. Honestly, when you listen, to the isolated, bass track, you realize that Paul McCartney didn't just accompany John. He gave John's lyrics a whole new identity. Another thing this video points out is how Paul McCartney pushed the arrangement forward. He knew exactly when to leave space, when to step in, when to drive the song forward, without overshadowing John Lennon's vocals. That's genius level collaboration right there, if you ask me. It just reminds me personally why the Beatles were, so unstoppable. John Lennon definitely brought, the raw poetry, the attitude, and the darkness. Paul McCartney brought the melodic genius, the structure, the musicianship. Together they created the perfect storm. For me, I mean, after watching this video once again, I will never hear Come Together, the same way again. I mean, it's not just John Lennon's anthem. It's a Beatles anthem, and Paul McCartney's fingerprints all over it. Honestly, this might be one of the best examples of how he saved, or rather transformed a track into something timeless. Big shout outs to the Beatles Bible, this channel, for unpacking, I mean, this so clearly. If you're a Beatles fan, or haven't seen this yet, go check it out, guys. I'll definitely leave the link in the description. It's one of those stories that deepens your appreciation, for just how brilliant these guys really were. Yes, shout out to the ability for throwing this, man. Guys, if you want to support the channel, if you want to support me, link is in the description. You can buy me a coffee. You can join my Patreon, all that good stuff. Let me know if you want me to continue doing videos such as this one. If you stuck with me to edit the video, I love you. I very much appreciate it on here. My name is Philip. Until the next reaction, take care, stay safe. Peace out.